What's going on, everybody? I hope everybody's doing well tonight. Today, we're going to talk about the income gap when it comes to your TSP, right? When it comes to your TSP and your overall federal retirement. So, as a federal employee, the thing that makes you different that we talk about all the time is the fact that you have your pension, you have your Social Security, and then you have your TSP. Now, again, when you're watching the news, and you're watching CNBC, you're talking to your friends and your neighbors, a lot of times all they have is their 401k and their Social Security. That's it. So they rely a lot on their 401k to spend the rest of their life. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but I just want to set the context as we go into the nice topic of the TSP income gap. And so when we talk about the TSP income gap, the thing we're going to talk about tonight, I'm going to help you understand why Fed Legacy, we have a system that we built for federal employees that we've built over the 18 years we've been in existence, and we've seen it work year over year with our clients that are now retired, right? So we want to make sure we give you that insight and help you understand why. And so a good place to start when it comes to understanding our why and why we set the structure of the plans that we do is this month. So if you've been watching the news, you see the back and forth with the war and all those different types of things. And so if you look at your TSP this month, the month of July, four of the five TSP funds have had a negative return this year. The F fund is at a negative 7.7. The C fund is at a negative zero point 0.9. The S fund is at a negative 3.5. And the I fund is at a negative 3.2. And today was one of the worst days in the market of the month, right? So when you have those down months, it becomes a problem when you're taking income from your TSP. And so what I want to show you all today is why that matters. So I'm gonna share my screen and walk through a presentation that I created that just shows you an example of what this could look like when it comes to your retirement. Now, when we meet with folks, what we do is we put you into our retirement analyzer system. Our retirement analyzer system puts your first pension numbers in there. It puts your social security numbers in there. Not social security number like the actual one, but social security income numbers. We don't put that stuff in there, but we put your social security income numbers in there, you, your spouse. Then we also put your TSP numbers, and then that calculates what the inflation risk is, the tax risk, and all that. But the thing we're going to focus on tonight is just the income gap and how we address it at Fed Legacy and why it matters and why it's different than what you might see from your friends and family who are non-federal employees. So for this example, I'm going to show you an example of somebody that has 500,000 in their overall TSP. Now, remind you, I'm not going to talk about pension. I'm not going to talk about Social Security today. I'm not even going to talk about taxes. I'm just going to talk about how to fill an income gap and how we address it and how you can address it yourself when you think about your TSP. So, when it comes to that, what we like to do is we like to look at what is the income gap that the person sitting in front of us needs. So, this example, we have a person that has 500,000 in their TSP. They have a $1,200 income gap. They need that $1,200 to last them for 15 years. Okay. What we like to do is we like to put it in different buckets. We have our protected bucket that we like to use for income, and we talk about our financial house. If you've been in any of our webinars, we talk about our financial house, how you have your foundation, you have your where that's where the protected money goes. In this case, the protected money would be this 200,000 because you need this for income. You need it. You can need it for long term care. You can need it for what you want to leave to your spouse. A whole host of reasons, but that's where that 200,000. We figure out what that amount is. We put that amount in the protected bucket. In this case, we have the 300,000. We put that in the growth bucket. But we like to have a growth bucket because a growth bucket is important because you definitely want to be outpacing inflation. As a federal employee, you could take on more risk because all of your 401k or TSP is not used for income like most people. So again, we have our protected bucket we use for income. We have our growth bucket we allow to sit. So out of 500,000, we put 200,000 in the protected bucket because that's what we're going to draw on for income. We have the growth bucket at 300,000. So let's look at the funds, right? If you leave all the money in the TSP, you have five places outside of, we're not going to go into the life cycle funds. We're just going to talk about the five individual funds. You can put it into five different funds. Most people, when they have their money in the TSP, they go and they move that protected money to the G fund. Now, the G fund is a U.S. Treasury bond account. So based on how U.S. Treasury bonds are doing, that's how the G fund's gonna perform. Now the G fund over the last 10 years has returned 2.8. We always talk about how inflation is higher than that. So with the TSP, with the G fund, you can have money there, but you're not losing anything, but you're losing buying power. So that's one option. You have the G fund. Then you have the F fund. Now the F fund used to be was is technically supposed to be a protected account, but as we've seen over the last couple of years, the F fund can lose money. So that's not necessarily a place where you can go now to protect principal. It just can't happen. And then we have the C, S, and I. C, obviously S&P. S, small, mid-sized companies. I, international. And so the C, S, and I is what we would consider the growth bucket accounts, and that's where we would put your growth money in that case. But in the C, the G and F technically are what we would call our protected accounts. Okay. So when we look at this, as I mentioned before, as we see July, your your F, C, S, and I are all negative. Your G fund is the only one that's positive. And if we go back and look at over the last 4 years, in 2022, the G fund did 2.9%, but to see the F fund in 2022 lost 12%. A lot of folks had protected money in the F fund, and that year lost a lot of money. And then you saw the C fund lost 18, the S fund lost 26, I lost 13. Why is that so important? Because if you're filling the income gap and you're taking 12, let's say in this case, $1,200 for a month from that bucket, and the amount and the account is negative in that year, you're now selling shares in an account that's going negative, which is never a good thing because every time you sell, you're reducing you're reducing the obviously the value of your account, but you're also selling shares that you bought at a higher price, which can be problematic, especially if you're already retired because you're not buying any new shares. And so when you look at this and you see these down years, now you see these positive years in the years after that, which is great. And so what we always tell folks is look, the growth account CS and I, great to have for long-term growth of money that you don't need. Not so good to have for money that you're drawing on a monthly basis because you can't afford those ups and downs, but you want the long-term growth, as you can see here. So those in 2023, the C fund bounced back, bounced back again in 2024, 2025, bounced back again some more. And in 2026, it's not doing as great, but you can see the positive returns overall, which you don't want to miss out on. The mistake that people make when it comes to filling that income gap is most people go all G and they say, okay, I want to be 100% protected. I'm moving all my money to the G because you're drawing income and you lose out to inflation, or folks draw and the money's in the CSNI and you're experiencing those dips. And when you're experiencing those dips and you're having income coming out, it can get quite scary for folk. And then they retreat to the G. My goal for you all on this call is to make sure that no matter what's going on in the market, you have balance. You have your protected bucket and you have your growth bucket. And so when we look at this, if you had 300,000 and you left it alone since January 2022, right? That 300,000 that we talked about putting aside, by now that 300,000, if you left it in the G fund, I mean in the C fund, will be at 498,000. Now, mind you, this is not including you putting in more money, but it's not withdrawing anything. It's allowing the money to sit and grow and weather the storm. When you're not touching money for growth purpose, I mean for income purposes, oftentimes you can just have to set it and forget it. And that's something that we preach heavy. So C fund, that 300,000 will be at 498. I fund it will be 476. If it was in the S fund, it would be at 412. Okay. Now, mind you, these are historical returns. It is not uh it does not mean what it could be in the future. Right. The next 3 years could be negative, the next 3 years could be positive. We don't know. This is just talking about the historical returns. That's all I'm talking about. Historical returns, that's all we can ever predict. It's history. We have to make decisions based on history. And so, well, you can make decisions based on history, but this is how we talk about it. And so if you put 300,000 in January 2022 and allow it to sit, these are the numbers that it will be. And that's including that negative 18% that happened in the C fund in 2022, and that negative 2026 in the S, and negative 13. Now, what we want to do is we want to let this money sit so it can continue to grow well into the future. Now, if we look at what it has done historically over a 10-year period, and we let this go out even further for the full 15 years that we talked about at the beginning, that 300,000 in the C fund, 1.4 million. With the S fund return, 1,092,000. The I fund average return, 8.27. I mean 827,000. These are big numbers over a 15-year period of just letting money sit. And so when we see clients and we're like, look, just let your growth bucket grow, these are some of the results that we've seen them have over the years in retirement. And the only way they're able to do this is because they have peace of mind knowing, all right, I have this growth money. I'm not touching it anyway. I'm gonna let it sit. The news could come and they could talk about all these things. I'm not changing it. I'm projecting it out for the long haul. This is what creates wealth. When you have different buckets of money doing what the job of what the different bucket of money is supposed to do. Again, growth bucket, protected bucket. Now going back to that $1,200 in income, one of the things that you can do, and we talk about this, there's different IRAs that you can use, and I won't go into specifics on that because those type of IRAs change often, and so you want to make sure you're getting the right ones. And so I'm just looking at one that we have on the conservative side. It does better now, but here's a protected IRA that had an 8% cap on it. So you get around an 8% average on this account in this account, right? So let's just put it at that. That's a protected bucket. And it's a place that we talk about helping people put money when it comes to drawing down income. So that's an option, an outside IRA that's a protected bucket, but gives you a higher return than what you're getting with the G and then the F. And so if you look at this example, again, the 200,000, taking out that $1,200 a month, what that looks at the end of the 15 years. If you were to take that from a protected book IRA, one of the ones that we offer, at the end of that 12-year period, 15-year period, you're still left with 124,000 in the account. What that means is we can definitely take more income than the $1,200 a month, right? Because we have some cushion there. But it also lets we know we're not draining out the account either. Another thing with the G fund, if you were to put that same G fund and take $1,200 a month, at the end of that 15-year period, you're left with 74,000 based on the average return of the G fund during the last 4 years. And if you look at the F fund, that money would have been gone after year 14. So those are just the numbers on the historical side. And so why does that matter? It matters because when you're putting money into a protected account, you want to make sure that you're doing the right math so you know exactly how much or how little you can take. And so in this case, this means that we could probably get more than $1,200 a month in income. That means, okay, well, maybe we can bump it up to 1,500 because we have some room. And so these are the kind of conversations that we like to have. The key is, and the reason why I don't like to take up all of the room at the beginning is because you might be in a situation where right now you need 12, but in the future you need 15. So we like to give it some runway when we're having this conversation. But the more runway we have, the more flexibility we have. But this is the bucket, the 200,000 that we started with in the protected bucket that we play around with when it comes to income, because that's how we fill that income gap. When we go back here, this 300,000, that is sitting in the background. That is sitting in the background, out of sight, out of mind, growing, while this is doing the heavy lifting in the beginning. And so this is a difference that not it's hard for people that are non-federal employees for the most part to do unless they have a lot of money in their 401k. But as a federal employee, you're able to do this type of stuff because you have a pension and you have social security and your pension's pretty large. And so these are the type of strategies that you want to keep in mind. The mistake that people make is they try to put all of the money, going back to the 500,000, into one big bucket. And what most people do is as soon as that 2020 the 2022 comes up and the markets are negative 12% and such, they move their money right back to the G fund. which makes sense because you're like, all right, I'm drawing money off this thing. I saw my account was at 500,000. Now it's at 400,000. I'm getting out of here. Boom, move to the G fund. Don't know when to take it back out. It stays there. And then we have a problem. But if you have it set up this way, like we talk about in our sessions, and this is just one of many strategies. When you have it set up like this, you panic because nobody likes to see their screen lose money on the screen. But then you understand, well, it's not that big a deal because I have time. And then what you do, we go through the retirement analyzer. We remind you the historical numbers, remind you of the big picture. And it's like, oh, okay, I can breathe a little bit because the money that's hitting my bank account every month is not affected by what's happening in the market. But what is impacted is your long term growth that you are able to continue to experience and ultimately fill a big wealth gap for you and your family, and allows you to do the different types of tax planning, leaving things for your children, investing in things you want to do. This just allows you to have peace of mind to live your life without stress. I tell the clients all the time who come to me before they have a proper setup, and they're like, well, I'm not sure. Like this market is up and down. I'm really not sure what I'm going to do here. And that type of stress you can alleviate to a certain degree by having the right type of structure. And that is what helps you close that income gap tremendously. And so, again, here's an example of what that drawdown looks like. It's just as you draw down, your drawdown is based on the amount of years, the amount of return that you're getting in the accounts. One of the things I love to see is when we do these mock illustrations and income models for people is when we see people that say, wow, I really can live off the interest of the money that I've built. And this is the reason why I always tell folks, while you're working, you want to make sure you're putting as much into your TSP as possible. Because the more money you have there, the more options you have. Now, I don't want you to feel bad if you're on here and you don't have a whole lot in your TSP. There's things you can do. But if you don't have a whole lot of if you don't have a lot of your TSP and you're not close to retirement, start putting as much as you can there. Right. Just make that a focus. And the way to do it is at minimum increase your TSP by 1% per year. If you can do two, the years you might get a 5% raise or 4%, at least do two. Because the more money you have in retirement, the more options you have. Right. We run in the class, they have 600,000 in TSP. It's like, all right, well, let's just put 200,000 in the protected bucket or 300,000, let 300,000 grow. It gives them a bunch of income and they just let their money grow. And it makes a huge, huge difference. And so I just wanted to share that with you all today, because that's a really, really important thing when it comes to filling that income gap. And I want to stop here for a second because we got 10 minutes. I want to see if there's any questions. Team, if y'all could put the questions that people have on the screen and I can answer them. Otherwise, I have other questions. I'm still working. I'm still working. Hold on. I'm still working. Put the question back up. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I'm still working and not pulling from my TSP yet. Does the growth bucket advice from the CS&I fund example still apply to me, or is that only for people already? I can't see the last part of your question. Well, I'll say this: when you're working, you want to make sure you have your money going into the CS&I, especially if you have more than 2 years away from retirement, because you want to get as much growth as you can. Once you get close to retirement, then you can start talking about taking some risk off of your TSP. It makes a difference in that way. But when you're working, you want to continue to put as much into the growth bucket as you possibly can. Then when you retire and you start drawing down that income, that's when it starts to make a difference on on what bucket each one goes into, if that makes sense. So any more questions? And so one of the things, especially this month, that has been impacting the TSP, as you all saw today, the Fed did not cut the rates, and so the rates held steady. So things like that, like when it comes to looking at the TSP funds and what impacts TSP funds, you want to look at when the Fed is talking about cutting rates or not. Typically around those times you see big swings in the market. So today you saw that the Fed today want to hold rates steady. So you started to see the Dow Jones today went down a couple, I think about 1,000 points. Days like that matter when it comes to if you're tracking the market and things like that. Those type of days matter. And so, if you're that person that, obviously I don't think you should be chasing the market and things like that. But if you are, days like today are days to really start to look and see, like, okay, what's going on with the Fed? Because if typically based on what the Fed says is how rates change. And so how does that impact your income gap? It impacts it because if you have all your money in the growth funds because you don't have a proper bucket strap set up, you might lose confidence based on what you see the Fed does. And so just be aware of that. Just know that those type of around those days you see certain swings. It's not the end of the day. Like it's not Armageddon, but it's just one of those things that can matter. Let me see. Is there any other questions? Is it safe for me to roll over my TSP and another that grows like TSP while still working as a civil servant? Demetrius, are you 59 and a half and older? So if you're not 59 and a half and over, no. Because if you do that, you're gonna have a 10%, you're gonna have a 10% withdrawal fee tied to it. And so you don't want to do it. When you're 59 and a half and older, yeah, there are different funds you can do, but don't do it until then. And it wouldn't be smart to roll your entire PSP over. Just going back to like that growth bucket and that protected bucket. So we have clients who are still working who move that protected portion over because they're getting more returns than they would be in the G and the F. And so if you look at the G and F fund, the G fund is around 2.8% the last 10 years, and the F fund is around 1%. And so they just want to be able to beat that return. And so they move the money that they want to protect for income. Because we would look and we'll say, okay, Demetrius, you're going to need $2,000 a month in income once you retire. Or you might say that's what you want. And so we say, okay, well, how much money will get you that $2,000 a month? Then we move that money to the protected bucket so we could get more growth for you while you're working and guarantee it, right? Because the thing that could screw things up is if we have all your money in the CS&I and then 2022 happens again and you're retiring the next year. Now the market dipped by 20% and you're like, well, shoot, I need this money for income. And that money that you needed for income is now dropped because we didn't put that aside and protect it before you retire. So that's why people would do it before they retire, but you can't do that until you're 59 and a half. If anybody wants to book a call and talk about this, my team is going to put the link in the chat. You could book a call there, or you could put plan PLAN. You just type that into the chat, and we'll make sure we book a call for you, and we could talk about what's the proper structure for you. The key is just having the right structure, and I could tell you from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients that we've helped structure this type of setup. It makes a big difference, especially when you see that growth bucket continuing to rise because it gives you a lot of confidence. And so one of the things that a lot of federal employees need, well, want, but don't necessarily need, so to speak, is like something like a long-term care policy. The more your growth continues to grow, the less and less you really need a long-term care policy because you can fund it yourself based on the growth of your account. And so there's a whole host of other things that the benefit of that growth account. The key is getting the right amount of money set aside that you can be aggressive with, and then the money that you need, you can be conservative with, allow that to pay your income. Makes a huge difference. Is there any other questions that anyone might have? We got about 6 minutes left. Even if I wrote, okay, yeah, Demetrius, if somebody's telling you a IUL, man, run, man. I can be honest with you, man. Most IULs are sold to you by friends or family that work for some type of network marketing insurance company. And IULs, just are not retirement tools in any way. We can sell them. I mean, because we are licensed with insurance companies, and they come to us and try to get us to sell our clients those things. But they sound good on the beginning, but they're packed with fees. They're packed with fees. There's a lot of surrender charges in them, and what ends up happening is as you get older, the cost to maintain them go up and up and up and up. And so when you start taking income from them, they just don't work in the long run. And the problem with them is because so many of those policies are sold not by real financial professionals, they're typically sold by people that work for like network marketing style companies. The person that sold it to you isn't the person that's going to be working with you 10 years from now, 15 years, when you're needing that income strategy. They're just someone that told you, hey, this is a retirement vehicle. It works. They make a ton of commission on the front end. And then when it's time for you to use it, it just doesn't work. You could do much better by using your Roth TSP. You could use annuities. You could do Roth IRAs. All those will do way better than an IUL because those aren't packed with the fees that an IUL is. An IUL is a life insurance policy. If you need life insurance, just buy a term life insurance policy. That'll protect you, protect your family members, and then build your TSP up in a big way. The cost of an IUL is not worth it. The person that oftentimes sold it to you has no idea about your retirement plans. It oftentimes is probably a friend or a family member. But definitely stay away from IUL when you're in your late 50s and such because the cost of insurance is so high with those things, man. And here's the thing, Demetrius, we get calls all the time from people who got sold an IUL 5 years ago. They're getting letters in the mail saying they got to put more money into it. And the person that sold it to them is no longer in the business. The person that sold it to them doesn't have any idea about their federal benefits. And then, unfortunately, we have to help the person get out of the IUL. And 9 times out of 10, they're losing a lot of money when they try to get out of it because it's just not built for retirement savings in any way. If you want to hop on a call, man, we can. I have my team reach out to you. We can talk about it. And you can send us the IUL, and I'll educate you on what I mean. But you could do those things that the IUL is promising you with your Roth TSP and with the Roth IRA without any of those fees attached to it. Hopefully that helps, man. And it's just it's unfortunate that so many people are educating people on this Roth, these IULs, man, and there's no regulatory bodies. Well, you're starting to see it now. They're starting to crack down on them a lot. But I'm telling you, man, in the next 10 years, you're gonna see a lot of lawsuits because of those IULs, man. Any other questions? How do I figure out which my funds should be protected bucket versus the growth bucket? It really comes down to is looking at what you need as far as income is concerned. Once you look at what your TSP balance is, you look at what you want your ideal income to be, then we can decide what that is. Typically, it's around about 40% of what your TSP balance is a good ballpark number. We like to use the rule of 100, where you take the number 100, you subtract your age, and then that's the amount of money that you put into that protected bucket. That's just a big rule of thumb. Obviously, it's more intricate than that, but if you want to do it yourself, that's a good number to start with. Any other questions? And thanks for all the good questions tonight. Um, yeah, Demetrius, thanks for bringing up the IUL one, man. That's one that you see talked about a lot on Instagram and places like that. But when you actually run those numbers and run those illustrations, it's just too good to be true. And when something's too good to be true, when you think you can put all this money into a life insurance policy and it pay you out all this money, it just doesn't work that way, man. Unfortunately, man. And I've been down that road. People telling me they want them, and we're looking at the numbers, and we're like, man, this just doesn't make sense. And the more and more you dig into them, you could do the exact same thing with your Roth TSP because the thing that they're selling you on is the tax advantages. But your Roth TSP, your Roth IRAs that you can get offer you the same exact tax advantages, but more growth, less fees, and then the life insurance part that they sell you on. Man, just buy a term policy, get it for 20 years. It'll cost you hardly anything. And then put more and more and more money into your TSP. And then you have a huge balance of investment that's yours, no fees attached to it. And then you use that money. The IUL, you're gonna keep paying for that thing forever, and the cost of it continues to go up based on the cost of insurance that the insurance company sets. And the older you get, the more that is. And what that does is that squeezes your cash value, it squeezes your income, and then before you know it, you get letters telling the insurance company telling you got to put more money in or the policy will lapse. And that happens a ton to people that get to their 70s. The problem is not a lot of people keep those into their 70s. And by the time that happens, that person is the person that sold it to you is out the business of selling it. And you just left there and we get those calls all the time. Any other one last question before we leave? Make sure you book a call to the chat and we make sure we get you out, get an advisor to talk to you, or I'll be one and we'll make sure we walk you through and help you close that income gap. All right, everybody, we'll see you back here next week. Talk to y'all later.